using the iPhone 4 in 2024. The iPhone 4 was a major overhaul over the previous generations of the iPhone. iPhone 4 introduced an improved camera, which has a 5-megapixel lens, and can record up to 720p at 30 frames per second, with a single LED flashlight, which was a notable improvement over the iPhone 3GS and 3GS, released in 2008 and 2009 respectively. The iPhone 4 is also one of the smallest in the series, being thinner and lighter than the previous iPhones, and having an all-glass back, with metal rims around the top, bottom, and sides of the phone. The home button is also made out of glass, as opposed to the plastic home button on the iPhones prior to the iPhone 4. The iPhone 4 features a single downward-facing mono speaker for audio, which isn't terrible in terms of sound quality, but it's not as loud as some Android phones from the time. The Samsung Galaxy Note 2, released in 2012, has a loudspeaker that blows the iPhone 4 out of the water, but if you're in a quiet room, you can easily blast drum and bass or dubstep on the iPhone 4, and the bass reproduction is actually decent. That's an area where most Android phones at the time really sucked. The iPhone speakers used to be the best of the best. The same goes for their camera, but Apple's quality is not what it once was. Now, all you get is the equivalent of a glorified garden shed, with fancy lights and paint, but it's just a shed, nothing more. That's basically what you get with modern-day Apple products. Back in the days of the iPhone 4, Apple was the Rolls-Royce of computers and technology. They had the best of everything, and having an Apple gave you exclusive access to Apple's proprietary software and services, but Androids offer cheapness and variety, so the choice is entirely on you. In terms of operating systems, the iPhone 4 supports iOS 7.1.2, which is quite outdated and no longer supports most apps. In fact, the iTunes and App Store seem to no longer work at all in iOS 7, so the usability of the iPhone 4 is extremely limited. Unless you want to go through the hassle of jailbreaking an iPhone, then you won't be able to do much with the iPhone 4. The iPhone 4 was also one of the last of Apple's products to use the then current 30-pin connector. This was replaced by the controversial Lightning port with the release of the iPhone 5 in 2012, the iPod Touch 4th generation, and iPad 2 would be some of the last devices to use this connector too, and now, it seems like Apple could go for the USB Type-C route in the near future, though we are unsure as of right now. The iPhone 4 can take some decent pictures with a surprisingly capable 5-megapixel rear camera, and for the first time ever, the iPhone 4 also has a front-facing VGA quality camera. Whatever that means. I don't use selfie cameras myself, I just don't do that sort of thing, so I will only be showing photos taken with the rear camera of the iPhone 4. Believe you me, this is a massive upgrade and improvement over the iPhone 3G, which is the only other iPhone I have at the moment. The 3G has a 2-megapixel rear camera, with no tap-to-focus, or optical image stabilization, and I have a couple of other surprises on the way, so stay tuned for those videos. Web browsing is limited on iOS 7, you can load Google, Yahoo, and some news sites, but nothing else really works here, so web browsing is pretty much out of the question with the iPhone 4. Keep in mind that this is not the iPhone 4S, which was an upgraded version of the iPhone 4. I have the regular iPhone 4. The 4S has an 8-megapixel camera, and runs iOS 9.3.5, so that's how you can tell the difference, and the white model of iPhone 4 seems to be hard to get. The iPhone 4 is also capable of making and receiving calls, however, as Australia just recently switched off its legacy 3G network, many devices, including older iPhones below the iPhone 7, will not be able to make and receive calls or send and receive texts once 3G is completely shut down, and you will lose the ability to make calls to the emergency services. The telco companies are now required by law to block any devices that are not deemed capable of calling 000. This includes the iPhone 4, because the iPhone 4 is a 3G only device, so once 3G goes off the radar, it will not be able to be used as a cell phone for calls and texts. The iPhone 5 and iPhone 3GS and 3GS are also affected by the 3G shutdown. Telstra's 3G service is set to sunset in early November, while Optus will possibly take 2 to 3 months to close their entire 3G network. so this might give me some time to test the calling capabilities, but this iPhone 4 is network locked to the Optus network, so I cannot use it as a phone, but it will be perfectly fine for FaceTime, so long as FaceTime still works on iOS 7. I have yet to have tested this out, so I am not sure if FaceTime still works on here. Most of the built-in apps no longer work, even the weather app no longer works on iOS 7, but the clock, camera, message, FaceTime, calculator, and calendar still work, as well as notes, contacts, and reminders, and Apple Music can store all your favorite tunes. I must admit, this is my favorite device to use as an M-Pages 3 player. It's just compact and small, and it's perfect for that sort of thing. So, is the iPhone 4 still worth it today? Absolutely not, unless you're a collector who's after one of these, or you need a dirt cheap secondary phone for calls and texts. Then there's no real advantage to owning an iPhone 4 anymore, and some of them sell for thousands of dollars. I was lucky enough to get this one for $20. You heard that right, I got this iPhone 4 for $20, but the home button can be dodgy at times, so I have enabled the virtual home button to make life easier, and aside from the good camera and decent screen and speaker, there's virtually no reason to buy these iPhone 4s anymore, except if you want to get one and salvage it for parts, or maybe you're like me and you love old technology and do it as a hobby, and if you're budget limited, then it might be great for a cheap phone for calls and texts, but aside from that, there's not a lot you can do with these iPhones anymore. However, the radical design and advancements of the time were a compelling reason to upgrade to an iPhone 4, and to this day, they hold legacy amongst Apple fan boys and users, and I never owned Apple in the past, so this has given me a taste of the iOS experience, and I really like it, except I still prefer Android because it's way more customizable and operational for me, plus it's cheaper, and the modern iPhones are boutique items anyway. I wouldn't buy that rubbish. Please remember to like, share, comment, and subscribe.